Hello and welcome to the first edition of Table Talk. My name is Nick Dysart, and with me I have Robert Landon, one of our fantastic City Council representatives. You're kind of a guinea pig. How does that make you feel?
It wouldn't be the first time.
Well, this is the first time we've done this, and the idea here is to give a platform to people in Marion County that are elected officials and other, interesting and important people, to have a platform to talk about who they are and what they're interested in and kind of what's going on in Marion. So I invited Robert, and he was gracious enough to accept and be the guinea pig for Table Talk. That's the super corny name that we've come up with so far. But in any case, let's just jump into it. I don't want to grill you like an interview style, so I guess my first question would be: how did you become interested in being on City Council?
Well, it's been quite a while actually that I've been thinking about doing something like this, and just seeing the way society has changed over the years, and now that I'm a father and a husband, and all the decisions I make and the local community makes, it impacts my family, and so I wanted to be able to have that voice, and I always felt that some people were underrepresented as well, and that's kind of why I ran on the campaign platform Your Voice Matters. And so I wanted to be that voice for people. I wanted to be that voice for myself and for my family, and make an impact in the community, and try to make the changes that I think would be beneficial to everyone here in our community. So
very cool. So let's talk about your family a little bit. You said you've got 2 kids?
I have 3 kids.
3 kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
A trifecta.
Yeah, absolutely. So that makes a family of 5. So you guys are ready to form a basketball team then.
That's right.
And
then we have the 6th man. We have the dog. So.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Very cool. And how long have you been married?
We have been married.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
6 years. Almost 6 years. It made me think about it.
That's awesome. So 3 kids, 6 years, and this is your first run into politics, correct?
Yes. Okay. This is my first run into politics. Not my first time doing anything at all in the community, but it's my first run in politics, and so it's been fun so far.
Good. What did you do before in the community?
Well, I was a youth leader at a local church here in Marion,
okay.
And so we did a lot of youth programs and youth rallies and outreach and things like that, block parties, and so now, obviously, being in the position I'm in, that's kind of expanded, but faith has always been a big role in my life. So.
Sure. I was just going to ask if do you feel that you were called to get into politics?
I do.
Okay.
And it's funny you ask that, because some people kind of mock at that, but for those of us who are people of faith, I think it plays a big role in our lives. And it's not something you would take lightly, because it's a big decision. And
yeah.
Being in politics now, that affects my wife and that affects my kids. That's changed their lives as well. So,
for sure.
It's not something you just make a snap decision on. And so it took a lot of prayer, a lot of thought, and it's working out so far. So.
Well, that's good. That's something that you and I had talked about offline. Was it seems like a lot of people of faith are kind of scared to even talk about politics.
Right.
Let alone get involved in them. So that that step to stop talking and start doing is a big one, and that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in the Fair Park area, is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
That's the first ward, and then some of the outlying areas outside of Fair Park is included in that.
You're doing some cool stuff in Fair Park, from what I've seen. Can you tell me a little bit about?
We've done a block. Yeah, we've done a block party 2 years in a row. We're going to expand that, make it a little bit bigger next year. And it's really just a way to bring our neighborhood together, but also the Fair Park community together. And we've had neighbors that's been on our street that we live on 10, 15 years, and all the neighbors are really friendly. We have great neighbors, but it's a way to bring people together. And they even said, hey, we've always thought about this, but we've never done it, and we're just glad that somebody is in the area and is bringing everyone together. And that's really what it's about. It's 1950s America. You see dad out grilling in the backyard and kids playing, and you're talking to the neighbors, and it's really just bringing that neighborly vibe back to the community.
I just burnt myself.
Even even with our differences. So
sure, that's awesome. So as far as the Fair Park, you talked about block parties. What goes on at a block party?
Well, you could structure it however you want. So a block party, what we've done with a block party is we try to have like food vendors, a DJ, different
Do you
music
dance?
genres. I don't dance. You don't want to see me dance.
That's awesome.
But the kids are dancing.
Sure.
So and that's
Yeah.
what it's about. The kids are out there. They're having a blast.
Yeah.
And we have a bounce house. We do cornhole, water games. We've raffled off things
Okay.
each year, and so that's a big hit. Everybody likes to get free stuff. So,
Yeah.
So it's been fun, and we've had a lot of great feedback. And next year, I don't want to spoil it too much, but we're going.
I won't tell anyone.
We're going big next year.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay. Like Kid Rock big or?
Well, not that big.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. Well, that's awesome. So if I remember correctly, you won your award from someone who had been in that seat for 22 years.
Roughly, yes.
That's impressive. Like, that's really impressive. What do you think led you to being successful in your first political run, unseating someone who had been there for 2/3 of your lifetime?
Right. Yeah, you make me feel younger than I am. So I think my being genuine and talking to people and being willing to go out there and work for it and talk to everybody going door to door. It was a lot of work, but it had to be done. And really connecting with people, finding out what they want and what they need in the community, and providing solutions, and then having fresh ideas. I'm a fresh face, and I think the community sensed it was time for change. And once somebody's in office for a while, people just think that it's time for change. And
Sure.
So I think that played a factor in it. But in my experience, I think my business experience plays a role in that. Although I'm a little bit younger, I don't know nothing. I know some
Sure.
stuff. I'm not an expert, and
Yeah.
I'm not a genius, but I know some stuff, and I
Sure.
think my ability to communicate that with the residents in the first ward, and just connect with them on what was really important to them, was the deciding factor for them, in my opinion.
What do you think was the best part about campaigning?
The best part about campaigning was also the worst part of campaigning.
I was going to ask you what the worst part was too.
And
So
it was door knocking, and because it's great to get out, and I've been in sales and marketing and business for most of my career, and so that's what I love to do, is talk to people and really persuade them on why my ideas, I think, are maybe the right way to go, the best path forward, and because that's what I try to do. I try to present the best path forward. But it's been fun, and door knocking is it's just so much work, man. You talk to so many people, and it's not even a citywide race, and so I can only imagine city and countywide races, what they have to do in state elections. But if you want to get elected, you got to door knock. You got to connect to people, and so that was the best and worst part about it.
I could see where that would be really tiring and hard to keep track of where you've been, where you haven't been, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you've got another year in your term. Are you
Yes.
thinking you're going to run again, or are you looking into something different?
I do want to do it. I don't want to do it forever. That's not me. I always want to go on to something else and improve myself. And,
Sure.
Not that being on city council for 20 years would be a bad thing.
I mean, it's impressive.
It's that's a great feat.
That's
Absolutely.
what, 10 elections in a row?
And every other
Or
year
11.
to
I
campaign.
guess it'd be 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To campaign like that. So the hats off to everybody that served for 20 years. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel, and kind of going back to what we were talking about with faith, I think God has other things for me in the future, and so we're taking it each election, and
Mm-hmm. So
this is where you have to go.
you're a conservative Republican, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
/libertarian.
/libertarian, yeah. that libertarian Republican Venn diagram seems to just kind of be creeping closer and closer together.
Yes.
While the liberal circle tends to just kind of be floating a little more farther away.
It's getting out there in left field.
There, at times, yeah. So I guess a question that I have that I've often been curious about is, when you're presenting your ideas to people and your platform, I would have to imagine that religiousness or your kind of thought process has to tie the two together, right?
Sure.
So how do you walk the line of explaining an idea to someone who doesn't share the same faith basis as you, as still being a good idea?
That's a great question. I think as Christians and as people of faith, I don't think we're called to force our beliefs on people, and that's the libertarian in me.
Sure.
But I think we're called to be a light and to have a voice and have a strong voice. I don't think we should take a back seat, and I don't think we should be afraid to voice our opinions and be afraid of what our beliefs are.
Sure.
I mean, the vast majority of Americans for the last 200 years have held those same beliefs, so why should we be ashamed? And so you have to reconcile that not everybody believes what you believe, but they still have rights, and so it's a balancing act. You have to find that happy medium that, how can I stay true to my core principles and not compromise them, but not trample on the rights of others as well.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
And it's not always easy. I mean, maybe you make the wrong decision sometimes, but then you learn from those mistakes, hopefully. And so you just have to balance it. But that's a great question.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that.
I've heard a lot of people who have voted Republican profess to be, and I'm going to see if I can get this right, fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
Yeah. And
I kind of feel like that's just being liberal with a really good accountant.
That's a good point.
And I think that there's this idea of what a conservative is, and it's this like taskmaster with a ruler that slaps you in the knuckles anytime you like want to have fun.
Right.
And I haven't seen that in 30 years. Maybe there was a time, where someone would be like, well, if you had fun today, you can't have fun tomorrow. And that was kind of like what a conservative was. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that there has been kind of an acceptance of, or maybe a release of some old ideas that maybe weren't scripturally based but were societally based, and then ascribed to conservatism.
Right. And
I feel like some of those have been let go lately. Do you feel the same or disagree?
I agree, and I think it all goes back to learning from your mistakes, and maybe in times past, maybe we were more conservative, hardline conservative than we are now, and I think now we have a true picture of what conservatism really is, and libertarianism, and libertarianism can actually be a wide spectrum, obviously. A lot of different people espouse that, but I think we're getting a better picture of that as we have more dialogue, and that's a key factor in this is having that dialogue. But conservatives really ultimately, and this is why libertarianism is becoming more popular too, as long as your rights don't interfere with my rights, I think is the best way to sum it up, and as minimum government as possible.
Sure.
I think is what conservatism is.
The stay off my lawn principle.
Exactly. Stay off my lawn. Don't tell me, how I can fix my house, and don't tell me, what I can do in my house if I'm not hurting myself, my family, and somebody else.
So if I want to have 8 inches of grass, can I?
That's a great question. Well, now we're getting into property values and
sure,
nuisance
absolutely,
and public health, but that's I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's that fine line. I think I made the right decision when I supported that, and
sure. I think your point of, as long as you're not infringing on someone else, but by having a property that is actively lowering the property values of that around it, you've now started infringing on someone else.
Right.
Now, is that to say that you should have your lawn manicured every week? No. Right. And I feel like that was kind of the extremes of that argument was it needs to be a golf course or a junkyard.
Yeah. And
so often that middle ground of, nope, just mow it.
Right.
is where we needed to be.
Right. And I know saying this, the liberals will really want to go after this, but, going back
don't
to
get us in trouble on our first show.
Well, that's why you brought me on.
Yeah, it's true.
Eisenhower, obviously being a president back in the 50s and how conservative America was in the 50s, always talked about the middle way and kind of being a moderate. And obviously, again, what liberals would say is, he was for high taxes. I wouldn't espouse that, but I think a lot of what Eisenhower did, especially in that era, was what was right for America. And I think he espoused that ability to compromise and that ability to build consensus without compromising core values. And so that's something I really respect about him. But that's what we have to do. We have to regain our civility. There's no reason that in America today that we're having these dialogues the way we are having them, because they're not productive. They're detrimental. It's kind of like a family reunion almost. You haven't seen that cousin that you hate in 10 years, and you see him, and then you're about to burst from the seams. So,
well, it seems today that every statement made gets taken to the worst possible extreme, and then added to by 10%, and then that's what's run with.
Right.
And it's so disingenuous, and I hate to say it, both sides of the aisle do it. And there's been this shift of not beating your enemy, but destroying your enemy.
Right.
And I don't like it. I find it to be mostly intellectually very dishonest, but also incredibly unhelpful. And so often you see this like scorched earth, idea of like, well, you can't just win, you got to destroy them forever.
Right.
But then a week later you need their help.
Right.
And so I wish we could find a way for people to back down the rhetoric. And if someone says something, take it at face value. It's not always racist. It's not always whatever is
some hidden agenda.
And I'm not going to give an example because someone will do it to me right now.
Exactly.
So, but I think there's the intent of the message, and then there's seeing the message on paper and ascribing your own intent to it that happens so frequently. So as far as city council, how has it been? You're a year into it almost?
Almost. We're getting there.
Okay.
It's hard to believe time goes by so fast that in a month it's been a year since I won the election already, and so time goes by fast, but it's going well. We had a rough start, I think, at the beginning of our term, because it was the first time in almost 20 years, or roughly 20 years, that Republicans have had control of city council.
Sure.
And so I think that ruffled a lot of feathers, and it was change, and everybody's rubbing elbows and trying to figure out how to work with each other and find common ground, and it's still a work in progress, but I'm having fun, I'm enjoying it, and I love the ability to serve the residents of First Ward and all of Marion, and have them come to me and with questions and problems in their neighborhood, and trying to provide that solution for them.
Is there anything in the first year that you would say you can kind of hang your hat on and say, this is something that I started from an idea and took it through and now it's a reality?
Yeah, so the online checkbook tool that we adopted from the state of Ohio, that was a free tool that municipalities can use. And
tell us a little bit about that.
We didn't have to pay for it, so that's a conservative
free
thing.
Is great.
That's right.
Free is great.
So what we did is we had a representative from the Secretary of State's office come in for a meeting and present to us on the benefits of this. And what it does is it allows you to go in, and we kind of had, and that's what the opponents would say, we kind of had something similar to this, but it wasn't on the scale of what we have now. And it could still be approved upon as always, but I just think it's a way to bring more transparency, which is what I campaigned on, and what I think others on council would like to see as well. But it's a way for you to go online to the city's website and see how your tax dollars are being spent. You can look it up by a specific contractor, if we contracted out work like on a road or something like that. You can look up how much we're spending on personnel, or how much tax revenue we're bringing in. You can look up it by month and by year. And so, we still have to improve upon it, but it's a great way to get that information out there. And I think the other issue to this coincides with it, is social media. And so we adopted a social media policy for city council. We're still in progress on building our social media pages and things, how we're going to approach that. But we do have a YouTube page where residents can go online and watch videos online. and see what's being said. And so I think that just expands that information and access to what's going on. And some people can't make it to meetings,
Sure.
and some people don't want to come to meetings because they feel disenfranchised. And so that's why this is one of the big reasons why I want to promote this, is for those people that feel disenfranchised. They're not comfortable coming up and talking to their representatives and
Sure.
sitting in on a political meeting and all the things that happen in them, or getting up and speaking in front of people.
Sure.
And so this provides that outlet for them, and a way for council to get information out there about what's going on in a nonpartisan way. Just simply, hey, this is when we're having our next meeting. This is the agenda items that are going to be discussed. And maybe some news announcements for the city and things like that.
Okay, very, very cool. Yeah, it sounds like, the path of least resistance to getting that information to people is important.
Right.
There's, to your point, probably people that can't physically make it to a city council meeting, or wouldn't feel comfortable getting up to speak, like you said, but they're more than capable of writing an email or a comment to get their point across. And I think that's really, really, really important. So if I also remember correctly, you're a little bit interested in this charter city. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means, what the difference is?
Absolutely. So currently, the city of Marion is what's called a statutory city. A statutory city, the difference between statutory and charter, a statutory city is set out by the Ohio Revised Code, and so there's certain limitations on what we can and can't do based off what the state of Ohio says.
Such
so
as?
They kind of set, for instance, so we have different elected positions that we have to have, and really you can't change the name of them and terms and things like that. Obviously you have your we have a mayor council form of government, so like a federal form of government, which I'm in support of. I don't want to use a charter to change our structure of government, which you can do. That is an option.
Sure.
But we have the Ohio Revised Code lays out that you have to have an auditor, you have to have a law director, and so on and so forth. And under a charter, you could change those titles. You could have a finance director. You could require them to have a degree or experience, as opposed to only just being an eligible voter or something like that. Simple.
So there's no currently requirements in the books for the county treasurer or anything like that?
No, as long as they're a resident and 18 years old and registered.
So they have to have a face and live here, and they're eligible.
Basically, yeah. And same thing
Okay.
for me, and
Sure.
that's the way it is. I didn't have to have a degree to run for city council, and so I think it is a way to include everybody that maybe I don't have a piece of paper, and I'm not trying to downplay college education, but maybe
Sure.
I don't have that paper that says I'm qualified, but I do have the experience. Or I'm sure there are people that don't even have that experience, but if you see them get in office, maybe they can do well. I mean, that's always a possibility too. But what a charter does is it allows you to have that basic framework, kind of like the Constitution. It's basically the city's constitution that governs what we can and can't do. And so some of the things you can do is you can fundamentally change your structure of government. So instead of having a mayor council form of government, again, I'm in support of, but you can go like Marysville and I believe Delaware. They have a strong council form of government, and then they appoint a city manager. And so basically all of the governing authority is in the city council. They appoint a city manager to run the day-to-day operations of the city, and they hire and fire that person. Kind of similar, I guess, to what we do on the county level with county commissioners. And so it allows you to, which we can kind of do this now, propose initiatives on the ballot to be brought towards to the voters. It allows you to set term limits. There's people that are for term limits. You can set term limits, and you can stagger the elections. You can change city council terms from 2 years to 4 years, or however you can change however long those terms are for elected officials. And so it just provides you more flexibility,
More local control.
more
it sounds
local
like.
control, and that's what I'm for.
Yeah.
Is I've heard it for years about from city officials here, man, about how the state has interfered in our business or just in municipalities in general, and we want to be able to have more say so. And so I would be surprised why anybody would be in opposition to this, because it does give us that. And so
Is anybody opposed to it?
I don't have anybody that I know of in particular that has come out right and said,
Sure.
"Hey, I'm opposed to it."
Yeah.
But when
I'd be curious to hear why.
people have things they say that severely question why you're doing what you're doing. And so you kind of can pinpoint those people that maybe they're not saying they're in opposition to it, but maybe they are, or they're still filling it out. And so it's a big process. It can take a year, even 2 years to accomplish if we do this, and we have to put this before the voters. So we have to create a special commission, and then the commission decides they want to move forward with this. It has to get brought before the voters, and then the voters have to decide if they want to do this.
Okay.
And so that's another great thing. It gives residents more of a voice in the process, and help you make sure that your representatives are actually representing you like they should be.
Okay. So before this would essentially be until next year's election before it could be on a ballot. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you can do a special election.
Sure.
Then you're talking money.
Yeah.
You run into the money cost, and there's still going to be a cost to this.
Sure.
And that's one downside, I guess you would say, to this. But if you can save money over the long term, make your government more efficient and work for the people based off of what the local community wants, I think in the long run that works better for us.
What would you see being some meaningful changes that you would make moving to a statute or moving to a charter city?
Well, there's so many ordinances that I could go through because we have a big city code.
We do.
And one thing that was actually brought up not too long ago in committee meeting was we had an issue with a dangerous dog killing cats. One resident, she had, I think, 2 cats that got killed by a dog, and so in the Ohio Revised Code, this dog wasn't deemed, or I'm sorry, it wasn't the dog, it was the cat wasn't deemed a pet or something like that, to where there wasn't really any protection. Now, if that dog had killed her dog, if she had a dog, there would have been protection.
Sure.
And so that was a debate, and we even had Representative Dorothy Palanda for our district come in and kind of talk on that as well, and some of the changes they want to make in the state. And so
Dorothy's great.
Yeah, I agree.
Dorothy's amazing.
And so I think stuff like that, if we can maybe there's certain things we want to put more teeth in our ordinances than what the state allows. If we can do that, I think we would look at that. But more importantly, to me, the fundamental thing is just giving us more control. And I feel personally it makes me even more accountable to my constituents because of that. And so I would be more curious, though. I think one of the controversial things I would be in support of would be term limits.
That's a really touchy subject.
It's a very touchy subject.
But everybody agrees. But if you bring it up, they disagree with you.
Because not everybody wants to. Not everybody wants to support something that you can really get hammered on in public, and so.
Yeah.
But that's not my personality. I'm not really worried about that. Term limits have that ability to again make us more accountable to residents, and it turns the politicians over more, so they're not staying in power too long and building the good old boy network. But what I would like to see is not really just term limits that permanently disqualify you from political office, but let's say if you're a mayor or you're a council member, and if it's 8 or 10 years or 12 years, whatever we decide on, if we did this to limit terms, would be, okay, so let's say, you're limited to 8 years, and then if you're out for 8 years, then you can come back in. And so that at least gives somebody else a chance.
Sure.
And then it gives somebody to still come back in at a later time and say, okay, I want to finish either what I started, or I have some new ideas. Maybe my perspective changed, and so there's ways to work it. But I don't think we can allow people to, or I shouldn't say allow, but I don't think it would be best for politicians being in office for 40 years, and it just turns into. No matter how you want to spin it, I mean, it almost comes into like a kingship, and I think that's why George Washington, being the first president, it was important for them to establish that term limit. And so why do we have term limits for a president? Because that power can become very powerful very easily, obviously.
So I think that's a really interesting concept, and I agree with you like 95%.
Yeah.
The 5% is that what I struggle with is if the people decide that that's who they want to keep electing, who is the government to say you can't elect that person anymore? But I agree with you, and I think that's where that maybe 2 on, 2 off, 2 on, 2 off is a good idea.
Right.
Because then that does give the people the the ability to come back and say, no, we actually did want this guy again. I think on a local level, it's a bit different. When you get to Washington, obviously there's a ton of lobbyists and a ton of special interest groups and a ton of money being thrown, and a ton of votes being essentially purchased. And with no term limits, you know, there's a lot less accountability, like you just said.
Right.
I think locally, I could be wrong, but I don't think the NRA is giving you any money.
That's right.
Okay. Well, and so that's where I think locally you kind of get into that, you know, the will of the people is pretty important.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, a rotating, like, you know, if you're on for 4, you're off for 2, something like that would be good. I think that'd be healthy and good. So is there anything in council now that's interesting, that's you know, worth talking about?
There's almost always something interesting in council to talk about.
You should make a reality show.
I don't know if I
just call it The Council.
The Counselor. It sounds that sounds like a movie.
It does. It
know,
does.
like Denzel Washington should be in that. So right now we have been talking, and actually just a couple of days ago in Legislation Codes Committee, which I chair, the issue of junk cars in side yards and in backyards, not just front yards, because we already have that on the books, and putting more teeth on the fine. We have the other issue is pods. Basically, is what we mean by pods is temporal structures that aren't really
the little storage container.
Yeah,
things.
like a shipping. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like a shipping container type of home. You know, maybe that's not what we want in our city. So we're discussing that, and then the other one is this is a heated topic, is building codes, and so we're really working through those, and we're taking our time because we don't want to rush into anything. And you know, I'm a person that's open-minded and willing to see both sides, and really as the chairman of this committee, I try to before I just start putting my opinion into the mix, just facilitate the meeting, let residents come in and say one way or the other what they want. Let other council members that don't necessarily serve on that particular committee come up and say what they want. Let the administration say what they want, and let's work through those. Because maybe my preconceived notion on yes or no for the junk cars issue or a building code or whatever it is, maybe I'm wrong because some new information presented to me makes me change my mind based off of factual information, or it's very persuasive. And so that's how I try to be as a city councilman. I try to be open-minded.
What is a persuasive argument for having a junk car in the side lawn of your house?
Well, I guess
I'd love to hear one.
I guess the persuasive argument would be, cutting down on blight to make neighborhoods look more appealing and more attractive, and hopefully raise property values and things like that. But I agree with the other side of it is freedom and rights, and you know, do you tell somebody they can't park their car in their backyard, or you know, being in the front yard is one thing, but in their backyard or side lot, and you know,
is there a visibility from the street, like clause or portion of that, or no?
Good question. I'm not entirely sure on that part of it. You know, I did even ask the question of, you know, what happens if the driveway goes from the very front of the lot all the way to the back to maybe they have an alley behind it. And so there's certain, what's already existing on the books now is a permitted driveway. And so I believe, if my memory serves me correct, that, you know, if they had a permitted driveway and if it did go all the way back, I think they would be okay as long as it doesn't take up like 30% of the parcel itself, because it's limited to 30% of the parcel or the property. And so, you know, it's very interesting time right now discussing these topics, because you know, people can get very passionate about this. The interesting thing on this building code, though, is about 20 years ago, the city of Marion adopted this, and this was 4 or 5 years before the state of Ohio adopted the building code in 2004. And so I think in 1999, I believe, is when we voted for the building code, and it went into effect in 2000, and then was quickly within a year or two there was a referendum, and it was rejected by voters by like 60%.
Oh wow!
And so
that's a pretty loud voice.
Yeah, you know, and so not a whole lot I don't think's changed in 20 years, and I don't think, and I don't get a lot of residents that call me and say, hey, you know, Robert, we need a building code. I think this will solve all of our problems.
Sure.
And so I think there are council members that have some good ideas right now that they're working through, and next committee meeting, when we have that, I think we'll work through more of the meat and potatoes of these arguments, and so it's going to be interesting.
I know in areas like Dublin, for instance, they have all the way to building code of what color brick must be used and that sort of thing, and I find that to be, especially in Marion, a bit excessive. Would you say that if the existing codes that are on the books were followed and upheld, do you think that would solve the problem?
The existing books in the city, or based off of what the state is saying? So I don't know if entirely it would solve the problem. I'm sure it would solve some of it, but there's other solutions to this then, instead of creating an entire building department that the city really wouldn't be able to afford. I mean, the only way you could afford to create this whole building department for the city of Marion is, there's the argument that you would have permit fees, but I don't know that with these permit fees, if that would be enough. I mean, you would have to have expensive permit fees to justify building this building department. So I just don't know if we have the justification for that.
Okay. Is there a specific code that you could see being added in, or something that should be removed? Or
I think you have the ability to really approach this issue from a zoning perspective, and so obviously in certain parts of our city we have houses that are more expensive and more valuable than others on a money basis.
Sure.
And so maybe you have certain requirements in certain parts of the area because those parcels are also larger than other parts of the area. So you could approach this from a zoning perspective. Maybe you have harsher penalties and stricter requirements in certain areas than others. And some cities do that instead of having a building code. But I believe, again, if I'm not mistaken, I believe more cities in Ohio do not have a building code than do have a building code.
Interesting.
So, I just, why would that be? So for a city our size, I don't think we can justify having that. And expensive permit fees, I couldn't support that. If I want to go and put a ceiling fan on my house, and again, do we want to get that detailed?
Right.
My understanding is 20 years ago it was that detailed. You had to have somebody come in and inspect and get a permit just to put a ceiling fan in your house. If I want to do that work on my own in my house, and if it's not unsafe and going to harm my neighbor's property, I think I should be able to do that.
Now, how does that impact insurance? So if let's say you decide you want to install a ceiling fan in your house, and you do a terrible job, and you turn it on, and it bursts into flame, and your house burns down.
Great question. I don't know how necessarily it would impact insurance. I guess you would, because every insurance company is different too.
Sure.
You would have to check with their insurance company, but I would imagine, depending on what kind of construction it was, if you did just a terrible job, whether you're remodeling, you're redoing the plumbing, your ceiling fan or light socket, whatever it is, if you're doing a terrible job and the insurance finds out about it during a claim, maybe they don't, and you have a house fire. I don't know how it works, and I guess it would depend on how your policy is structured. So maybe you don't get that claim covered.
I then wonder, kind of talking about the whole stay off my lawn, if my neighbor sets his house on fire because he installed a ceiling fan incorrectly and now my house is on fire, I do wonder if having that code in place of saying, maybe not a fee, but it has to be inspected, or I'm curious how we can how we could solve that, because I'm all about, if you want to put a fan, if you want to put 30 fans in your living room and create a wind tunnel, great, float on.
Right.
However, when your wind tunnel then burns down my house, that's that whole line. How do we stop that?
So you could approach it from a consumer protection aspect, and that's more what I'm in favor of.
Okay.
At this point in the game, I guess you would say, if I sell my house too, and and if I just did a terrible job, I didn't do something that was up to code, and you buy my house, and I didn't tell you, and it wasn't disclosed, and the inspection can't find that, what happens between me selling the house and you buying it.
Sure.
Am I protected or are you protected?
I'm gonna knife your tires.
So you probably deserve it.
That's
so
funny. I'm not doing that. If your tire's in a flat, it
so
was
now
not
I know
me.
if I have a knife tire, it came from Nick. So it's consumer protection. I think is what most people could agree on, and so it's just really finding that common sense approach, not overdoing it, and obviously some regulation is needed, but we don't want to justify creating a whole building department and over-regulating people.
Over
no
extreme
reason. Right.
what ifs,
Right.
like I just came up with. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense. What else is interesting on council?
Well, one thing, kind of going back to what you asked me earlier on what I'm proud of what we've accomplished on City Council, we have agreed to lease 5 new police cars. And we just recently approved a purchase for a fire truck, and we're just working on upgrading our first responders equipment.
Where do you lease a cop car from?
Well, they
Asking for a friend.
So, our safety department and administration, they look out for bids that they think would be best for the city, and they go to the dealership and they can get that kind of like a fleet type deal because they buy in bulk. And then, you can also structure it where you can purchase or just turn them in and turn them over. And I had heard that some, like federal law enforcement agencies do that because they have such large fleets that they lease them and they turn them over so they're not building up the repairs. Because we had some police cruisers and some of our fire apparatus that was just costing us big bucks to repair.
Sure.
So it's at what point do you just keep putting money into that, and so you're not receiving a return on that investment. So now we're going to receive that return on investment. Our police officers, our firefighters deserve the best because they put their lives on the line for us every day.
Absolutely.
And so that's something I'm very, very proud of to have supported. So.
That's awesome. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What vehicles did they end up leasing for the police?
Good question off the top of my head.
Are they Chargers? I hope they're Chargers.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I want to say at least a couple of them were the Explorers, but again, I don't immediately recall.
Do you have the same panic that I do every time you see a white Explorer driving behind you?
Not really, because I find myself obeying the law.
Well,
so.
I'm not speeding. I could be doing 54 and a 55, and the minute that white Explorer pulls out behind me, I'm just like, It used to be Crown Vics. It used to be Crown Vics, and now it's that white Explorer. It's like seeing a shark in the water behind you.
It's true. I remember having a Crown Vic as a rental car one time.
Oh yeah.
And pulling up behind people, and you just see them looking at you, in the rearview mirror, like you're this undercover police officer.
Yeah. It's black Crown Vics, white Explorers, and white Harleys.
Yeah.
Anytime I see those, cruise control is set, and I'm just hands at 10 and 2.
I think I would be concerned if I seen a police helicopter hovering over my car. Then at that point maybe I'm misconstrued as a drug dealer or something, and so that's when I'd be concerned. But no, I think our law enforcement officers, they do a great job, and and if they pull me over because my license plate light's out or something. And you don't realize that.
Yeah.
You don't always realize that. So, and I think they do a fair job. So, but you're right. I mean, there's people. My wife's one of them. She gets nervous when she sees police officers.
Sure.
So it's just. I think it's just a natural feeling, the way we've been conditioned to see police officers as, I guess.
Well, the 2 speeding tickets that I remember getting was because it was 75 degrees out, and Sweet Child of Mine was on the radio. And I was just cruising, and all of a sudden, I look down and I'm doing 70 at a 55, and there's a cop behind me.
Oh my!
And so it's not like I'm constantly like speed racer, but it's one of those things where you're so zoned out that those lights come on and snap you back to reality, and you're like, oh no!
Right. I guess on a motorcycle, I guess it would be easy to.
Yeah. Well, those were all in a Toyota Corolla, so I have
what's your excuse?
Yeah, no excuse. It wasn't. I didn't even look cool at the time, so there was no excuse. Oh, that's crazy. So as far as being on council, have you found that there's certain members that have kind of been able to mentor you, or you've kind of clicked with, and there's some that you're constantly like being challenged by, and kind of what's the dynamic as far as that goes?
Absolutely. So, just a couple people that I greatly respect on City Council. I think that they have good insight. And this would be a big thing for me to say because I come from the opposite party, but I don't think that should matter. I think Josh Daniels has great insight because of his experience and what he's done. He's been on the county commissioners board, and he's been on City Council. Owns a business. He's a businessman, and I don't think he's afraid to go against what his party says either. He's willing to have his own opinion and stick to his values. So him and I would say Jason Schauber. He had been on council previous to this term, and he's come back, and so he has experience, and I really value his insight. The other person is Rick Huddle, and Rick Huddle is everybody knows Rick Huddle in town for the most part, especially if you've been around Marion most of your life. An educator, great community person. He's intelligent. He cares about the issues. And speaking of hidden agendas, I don't think you could ever accuse Rick Huddle of having a hidden agenda. And the man has had some, difficulties recently with things in his health, and he's overcoming those, and he's done it with grace and grit, and so I greatly respect him for that.
That's awesome. I've seen you lock antlers a few times with a few other members, and what I do enjoy about it is that it's typically, for the most part, always while heated, typically professional, and I do like to see that challenging of others' thoughts and ideas and stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Well, this goes back to my thought on you have to have that balancing act, and you have to be willing to compromise and being open-minded. And so if somebody approaches me and if they accuse me, and I've been accused of a hidden agenda a few times since I've been on council, and I'm just shocked when anybody in local office would even assume that without any kind of evidence and justification. But if I'm approached and I'm verbally attacked for holding an opinion of something or in support of something without going after them,
sure.
And then the conversation just quickly divulges into these accusations and name calling, like we're in school again, like we're on the playground. And
well, I'm rubber and you're glue. Whatever you say. Yeah.
Sticks and stones. Yeah.
Right.
It's just I just don't subscribe to that, and I'm not willing to go play in the mud. But I will defend myself, and if somebody's going to on social media or in person, if they're going to drag my name in the mud, or if they're going to make false accusations against me, I feel I have every right, and I will intend to defend myself.
Sure.
And my reputation, because I feel I'm an honest person, and that's how I try to approach everything, again, with an open mind and no agenda, just to serve our community. And again, if somebody's going to do that, I'm going to stand my ground. And so
sure.
I think everybody should, and that's how I raise my kids. If you're on the playground and somebody's bullying you, you have to stand up to bullies, or it's going to occur and occur and occur. And
silence is permission.
Right, and so you have to take all precautions, and you have to do the right thing. And obviously, if there's violence involved, I want my kids to be able to defend themselves. I don't want them to get hurt, because they can get hurt very badly if you let that kind of thing happen. And I think the same thing with words. If you let verbal attacks go on for too long, it can hurt you. It can damage your character. And I don't believe sticks and stones break your bones, but words don't hurt. I think words do hurt to people, and I don't let it get under my skin like that to where it hurts me emotionally. But I'm going to defend myself.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. I think there's a point where you can let that bully or whoever talk and kind of expose themselves as the bully,
right?
And everyone then sees them as the bully,
right?
But when it's unceasing and they've been exposed and they don't care,
right?
That's when you kind of got to say, enough's enough, and kind of put them in their place. And I think that's a really good thing. So speaking of defending yourself, I'm assuming yes, but are you a 2A guy?
I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter.
Okay.
And I think I even said something like this on Facebook recently is without the First and Second Amendment, we don't have America as we know it. We might have America, but we don't have it as we know it. And you take my ability or your ability for free speech away and gun rights to protect yourselves from criminals and the government, then we're in a dangerous place.
Sure.
So I'm a very big supporter of the Second Amendment.
I find it interesting when someone who's a 2A supporter brings up protection from the government, because it sounds so tinfoil hat, but it's true.
Because that's the way we've been conditioned.
Yeah, exactly. Because
times.
government is daddy, and they're there to take care of you, right. and how could you ever stand up to the government? Right. And I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter as well, and I do find this movement towards no guns or no semi-automatic weapons, and I find the lack of education really upsetting. If you want to have a conversation about what guns we should and shouldn't have, understand how guns work in the first place.
Right.
And I'm not saying everyone needs to be an expert and know the difference between a Ruger and a Smith & Wesson.
Right.
Which is virtually the name, but still, you know what I mean. But at least understand, if you say no semi-automatic weapons, we're now using flintlocks. Like that's pretty much everything.
Right.
And I do find that interesting. Huge Second Amendment supporter. Myself personally, I grew up, hunting and target shooting with my dad, and those were some really great times. And he taught me from a very, very young age, not only how firearms work, but how to respect them, and most importantly, not to touch them.
Right.
And I think that is if it's taught young and early, then it's learned and it's not an issue.
Exactly.
I lived in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and so we had loaded guns around the house in case Wild Cody showed up and tried to attack our dog, or someone was trying to steal our horses or cows. Now it sounds like I'm in like the Old West and there's cattle rustlers, but it was a legitimate concern, and never once in my mind did I ever think to touch that without being directed to or permission or anything like that. And I think that parenting, and education from a young age is super important. So as far as that goes, are you thinking long term, anything as far as maybe trying to get your kids down the road to get into politics, or are you kind of just we'll see what happens?
Yeah, I certainly want them to be involved in some aspect in their community.
Because you're young enough, you could both be on council at the same time.
So now we're talking about this like LeBron James and his son
exactly.
basketball.
Yeah, we could have Robert Landon IV.
We don't have a Robert Landon IV, so we're good. We stopped it there.
Okay.
But that would certainly be fun. I mean, that would be interesting serving in whatever political capacity with a family member like that. But I certainly want them to be involved in their community and in the political process, whatever form that takes on. But we support our children to make their decisions when they get older. But we want to raise them up a certain way to have obviously certain values. And I don't know what it would entail when they get older, because the future is always uncertain, and so maybe they don't want to be involved in politics at all, and I would completely be okay with that. I hope that they find some other way though to get involved in. But they enjoy knowing that Daddy is in the evening sometimes not home because he's doing important stuff. Being at their young age, they understand, and my 11-year-old really understands this, and he's proud of me, and so I love the fact that my oldest, he has a better understanding, obviously, and to see his pride in me means a lot. And my two little ones, they miss Dad when he's not home. And they know, I'm going to my meetings, and they don't want me to go to my meetings, but they understand why, and so it will pay off in the end. But I think setting that example for them when they get older and they even understand more, I think they'll be okay with it, and it might set that path for them.
So are you a Marion born local, or did you?
Yes.
So here the whole time.
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, with the exception of a few years of my life, I've always lived in the first ward even.
Okay.
And so I think that was another reason why I was able to connect with folks in the First Ward is, hey, I've been around here. I remember what it was like in the 90s. And
Sure. You're homegrown.
Yeah, I'm homegrown. And so, my parents trusted me to ride my bike all over Fair Park because I knew my way around Fair Park and when I was young, and they just weren't worried about that. And now,
Did you have the baseball cards in your spokes?
Well, I didn't have them in my spokes, but I had baseball cards. I didn't do the Pokemon cards.
Okay, that's absolutely fine.
But, would I trust my 11-year-old and my 5-year-old right now to ride all over Fair Park? No.
Okay.
Not because we have terrible people, but you just never know what can happen. Society's different now.
It's a different world.
Even when I was a kid. But I'm proud to be in the First Ward in Fair Park most of my life, and I love my neighbors, and I think we have a great school there. And
what school district is that?
That's Taft Elementary.
Taft,
And
okay.
I believe that's the largest elementary based off of student enrollment in the city of Marion.
What middle school and high school does that
Well,
go into?
it goes into Grant. All
Okay.
the elementary schools now, anyways, go into Grant. When I was a kid, I was the graduating class of Taft back in 03, 04.
Okay.
And so I was the last class at Taft, and it's sad when you drive by that lot and you don't see a school there because
Yeah.
all those memories that are there. But you understand why we upgraded our schools several years ago. But the rivalries were there. I missed the Taft versus Baker and Edison rivalries. Those were always fun. Playing sports. But I think we have the right path now. We're more unified. We're starting them younger to be more on the same team. Hey, I'm from Marion. I'm a Marion president.
Yeah.
Or I'm a River Valley Viking. I think it's important to build that pride and community, a sense of community early. And at Taft, they talk about, they're called Taft superheroes. And so, that's important. So it's completely different though now. When I went to Fair Park Elementary School, obviously, and it's just weird calling it Taft because I went to Taft Middle School and
Sure.
now it's Taft Elementary. So that's different. But
They were able to keep their letterhead though that just said Taft on it. That's probably why they did
Yes.
it. They had a bunch of sticky notes they didn't know what to do with, so they just named the elementary school.
right,
That's awesome. So you're also in the National Guard Reserve,
State Ohio Military Reserve.
Ohio Mil. Okay, what's the difference?
So Ohio Military Reserve is strictly serving Ohio at the discretion of the governor of Ohio.
Okay.
And so 24 states have what's called a state defense force.
Okay.
And Ohio has one. We have a long history of this. And it goes back to our colonial times where
Is it
the
like a
Minutemen
state militia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's the militia men in the colonial times basically kind of you could say won the war, were a big part of the Revolutionary War, and so it's a long tradition in history in America, and I'm glad to be a part of it and that it continues to this day. And I wish more people would be a part of that because what happens when we're thin here on the home front? Who's going to protect the home front?
Sure.
So we need those people.
What made you decide to get involved in that?
Well, I've wanted to do that for a long time too, and so this provided that ability for me. And now that I'm in politics and I have a family and kids, enlisting in the Marines just isn't the option for me right now, and
Sure.
going overseas. And I greatly respect our servicemen and women that do that, and the sacrifice that they lay on the line, leaving their kids and
Absolutely.
their wives, or having a baby while they're overseas. I just couldn't fathom going through that.
Sure.
Recently I just got back from our annual training up at Camp Perry on Lake Erie here in Ohio, and being gone a week from my family was a little bit of torture for me because I'm a big family man, and my kids, I had to FaceTime them every night or every other night.
Sure. So what sort of training is that? Is that as intense as Army or Marines or how? What is the training like?
Not as quite, because you have right now the State Defense Force. Maybe 7 years ago, roughly 8 years ago, transitioned to more of where we primarily respond to when called upon to natural disasters and things like
Okay.
that, as opposed to getting ready to fight a war.
Sure.
And so that's kind of
Not a lot of Ohio invasions.
right, exactly
Happened.
And the interesting thing though, Ohio is one of maybe 3, I think, states in the country that has a naval militia. We have the Ohio Naval Militia that patrols Lake Erie. So that's interesting, and that's been a tradition since we had the dispute with Michigan and in the colonial times, because we bordered Canada, and at that time British and French forces were up there, and so we had to have some kind of protection. And the Ohio Assembly, our Ohio legislator, has agreed to keep that in place, because you just never know over the years that we border another country. So
do they function with the Coast Guard or
They
separate
work-
from, or
They work alongside the Coast Guard,
okay,
as needed, but they're still their own separate entity. Just like Ohio Military Reserve can work alongside the National Guard,
okay,
but we primarily don't. And so that's the great thing about it, is maintaining your own operations, but everybody can work together too,
okay.
because everybody has a unique purpose
That's-
and mission. So
Very cool. So is it bring your own gun, or do they provide?
right now we are unarmed.
Okay.
We don't carry.
So that
guns.
Second Amendment's super important then.
Exactly. And so maybe one day they'll bring it back. There's always talks
Sure.
about whether we change our mission or get a new mission, or whatever the case is. But we call it OMAR, the Ohio Military Reserve, or OMAR, stands ready for whatever the governor will call us up for. And another interesting fact is Alaska has a state defense force, and traditionally, again, you don't get called
Against
outside
mooses.
the state. They probably
To keep the
have
moose
that
at
issue
bay.
up there.
Well, they're a lot closer to Russia, so I can understand why they
Exactly.
have
Yeah.
as many defense forces as they can
They
get.
got to get ready.
Yeah.
But the governor of Alaska sent some of their state guard down to Puerto Rico, I believe it was, when they had a recent hurricane, and that's unprecedented. Usually, the governor doesn't do that. It's usually the National Guard that would get called up for that. And so,
Sure.
and if you look at states like Texas and California, you see literally no difference between their state guard and the National Guard. They're fully weaponized, and and the whole 9 yards. So there's obviously a need for it. And
Is there any plans to defend Ohio from the Canadian soldiers that come across Lake Erie every June? Could you guys stop that?
I don't want to answer that.
You know what I'm talking about, the big mayflies that come across? Have you seen those?
Yeah.
If you guys could get on stopping that,
Yeah.
because I swallow 3 to 4 every time. I love riding down Route 6 across Lake Erie, and those things are just coated. So if you guys could come out, fly swatters maybe?
I'm not a.
If we could just station someone every 6 feet, that would be.
I guess if it's a natural disaster.
It's a
natural disaster.
If you haven't seen it, it is a natural disaster. No, they literally, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they come across Lake Erie and they just carpet
Really?
like 15 miles inland.
I haven't seen it.
They're these giant bugs about this big, and they're there for 2 weeks and they all die. They have the most miserable existence. They're pointless insects,
Yeah.
and they're just horrible.
Yeah.
Thank goodness they don't smell. Well, that's really cool. That's a super awesome thing to get involved in. So you were elected to office. You joined the Ohio Military Reserve, all in about 6 months.
Yes.
Okay, you've got a really supportive wife.
She is very supportive, and you know what? She door knocked just as much as I did.
Yeah.
If not even more than I did for City Council. She really believes in what I'm doing, and just very loving and caring. And I couldn't be more blessed to have her. And that's not just saying that because she might be listening, but I really mean it. And
Yeah.
she worked hard, and I'm sure there's people that voted for me because of her. And in fact, we know people were telling her that she was door knocking in the rain even for me. And hey, if you're door knocking for your husband in the rain, you must have somebody special. So,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm happy to have her in my corner, and that she supports me in everything. And so, yeah, I try to be involved in as much as I can, but not overwhelming to where I'm away from my family too much. 'Cause
Sure.
I have to balance that. And but I want them to know that I want my kids to know that Dad is busy, that Dad is involved, and he's doing something worthwhile. But he still comes home and spends plenty of time with the kids.
That's
So,
awesome. Very cool. Anything else we haven't talked about or that we missed?
I think this is a great program you're doing here, and I just wish you more success in the future, and maybe even somebody more interesting than myself as your next guest.
You've set a high bar to top, so we'd definitely love to have you back anytime. Any sort of city council updates or anything you want to come on and discuss, again, you're always welcome back.
Thank you.
So thanks for making time. Thanks for being the guinea pig. And yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.